So once you've set up the framework and set up your hypothesis and said, I'm going to the interviewer, I'm going to look at X, Y, and Z. Generally speaking, that you move into the quant piece of the interview. So, for example, most of the time with interviews or case interviews, the interviewee usually has one or two backup slides or pieces of data that they want to test your quant ability. So, for example, in the case, you might say, do we have, or you might ask the question, do we have any additional data on what the breakdown of their costs in their box division? And the interviewer will generally say either, no, we don't have any data, or they'll say, actually, the client provided us with some data, and here's a sheet, or here's a table of the breakdown of their costs. So that's where it comes back to, the interview is trying to help you. So they'll generally try to guide you towards asking that question and asking for that piece of data of that piece of paper they have in their hand. And the key to getting that is just following the interviewer's cues. So they'll try to guide you, and that's why it's important to listen to the interviewer to see where the case should be going. So when you're presented with this appendix or data table or chart, the key is to learn to interpret it quickly. You want to be sure to pull the key findings from the table and point out the things that you'd like to dive deeper into or investigate. So if you see a table of costs that break it down by variable cost and fixed costs, generally, it might be across a time series, so from 2005 to 2010. And if you see on the chart that costs are increasing, you can say, well, costs are increasing. I'd love to look into exactly why the costs are increasing. When you're doing the quant piece, the interviewer will most likely ask a few questions about the table or the numbers. So they'll say, what's the annual growth rate for the box division? And it's up to you to say, okay, yeah, sure, let's look at the box division. It's starting at 10,000 units, and it's growing to 15,000 units over 5 years. So then generally you can take a minute or 30 seconds to say, okay, I'm just going to calculate that right now. The key is to always write down your numbers on your paper, because the interviewer will always watch to see what you're doing. And talking out loud and talking through your thought process helps, especially when it might be a very difficult calculation. With the quant piece, it's generally not extremely hard quant. The most important piece, and the piece that they're testing, is how do you approach the problem and how quick are you at solving the mental math piece. Making mistakes, it does happen because we're all nervous. We're all trying to do things very quickly. But as long as you catch it yourself, and as long as you don't make too many mistakes, then it's okay. But if you continue making the same mistake over and over again, then it adds a seed of doubt into the interviewer's mind as to whether or not you can perform under pressure in the real world. So with the mental math piece, it's important to learn the multiplication and divisors up to, rule of thumb, 20 times 20. So 15 times 15, 16 times 16. I mean, you probably don't need to go that high, but it's quick to learn. I know when we were small, we were all doing mad minutes or those multiplication tables. It's just important to have those at the back of your mind, since you do not get a calculator in these cases, so everything needs to be by hand, the old-fashioned way. But it's not going to be extremely difficult multiplication. Generally speaking, it's numbers like percentages of a market size. So what's the market size? So 15% of 30 million, or what's 1/3 of 450. these are generally easier calculations, and you should be able to get those, quite quickly. Another tip for the quant section is to learn shortcuts. So limiting zeros, rounding, estimating. Estimating is fine as long as you say, is it okay if I round to the, into 1 decimal point or round to the nearest number? The interviewer will be fine unless it's, a very easy one to do, but they have no issue with rounding or estimating. And as I mentioned before, single mistakes won't actually, lose you the interview. If it's simple, 2 plus, if it's a simple 10 times 9 and you get 89, then, it's close enough, but as long as you are able to catch it and say, oh, actually, it should have been 90, then that's fine.